This created a culture of mistrust that can never happen again, and there will be leadership accountability.
So I knew that things were bad with Boeing Starliner when Butch came back down to Earth and did an interview with Eric Berger talking about some of the issues that we didn't really know about during the time. But new information has come out today during a press conference with NASA headed by Jared Isaacman, and it's pretty shocking. And now, not only is an over 300-page report being released about several investigations and the findings, but Jared shared that at the time, this should have been classified as a Type A mishap, and it was not, and now they're calling it that. And if you didn't know, Challenger and Columbia also fall into that same category as a Type A mishap or a disaster. To qualify, there has to be loss of life, permanent disability, or critical damages exceeding $2 million. Thankfully, Butch and Sunny came back down to Earth safely. We all remember this. They were up there for 9 months, and hey, they didn't come down on Starliner because it was just not safe enough. But was it even safe enough to go up? It sounds like not really.
Now, post-mission, despite the loss of 6 degrees of freedom control and cost thresholds exceeding a Type A mishap by a factor of over 100, a mishap was not declared. Concern for the Starliner program's reputation influenced that decision. Initially, our commercial crew program investigated itself. Ultimately, these decisions were inconsistent with NASA's safety culture, and a subsequent independent investigation was commissioned, and the record is now being corrected. Today, we formally designate this event a Type A mishap to ensure lessons are fully captured for future missions.
Now, what I love about today's press conference is Jared is so transparent. He sent a letter out and then read the letter on stage. It's a very long and thorough letter, and so I want to read you some of the highlights and hear some of what he had to say. So I'm going to share the entire letter at the end, but basically some of the craziest statements are the first point, which Jared writes, Starliner has design and engineering deficiencies that must be corrected. But the most troubling failure revealed by this investigation is not hardware. It is decision-making and leadership that, if unchecked, could create a culture incompatible with human spaceflight. So then he goes on chronologically to talk about the different test flights and all of the issues that they had, and basically some of them they were never able to fully understand, unexplained anomalies, and they just kept going. He says that the investigations did not drive to or take sufficient action on the root causes of major anomalies. The investigations often stopped at the proximate direct cause, treated it with a fix, or accepted the issue as an unexplained anomaly. He also talks about Butch and Sunny's crazy journey to dock to the space station and all the issues that they were having on orbit. He says, it is worth restating what should be obvious. At that moment, had different decisions been made, had the thrusters not been recovered, or had docking been unsuccessful, the outcome of this mission could have been very different. And he ends it by saying that the decisions that were made were inconsistent with NASA's safety culture. And he's sharing all of this because he thinks that this has created a culture of mistrust, which there's been mistrust in the past. We know about the tragedies that NASA has had over the decades. He says that this can never happen again. But surprisingly, one of the questions from the audience is, what's going to happen now with Starliner? Does this mean that Starliner is done? And it sounds like no.
Given that the space station only has 4 more years as of right now before it's decommissioned, why continue with Starliner at this point? Surely this investigation is going to be continuing on for a while longer. Why bother to keep Boeing on board at this point? Thanks.
So at NASA, we see near endless demand for crew and cargo access to low Earth orbit well beyond the life of the International Space Station. One of our top priorities here, in line with President Trump's national space policy, is to ignite the orbital economy, which hopefully necessitates numerous commercial space stations in low Earth orbit, in which case, as I mentioned before, America benefits by having multiple pathways to take our crew and cargo to orbit. We certainly hope, and we intend to fully work with Boeing in the months ahead to get to technical cause of the thruster issues, to implement the recommendations from the independent investigation, and return to crewed flight.
But after all of this time investigating, they still haven't figured out the root cause for these issues. NASA and Boeing are working together to do just that, and then we may see a cargo flight and possibly a crewed flight after that, but the clock is ticking. Remember, the ISS is set to deorbit in 2030, and we're already in 2026. Who knows how long it's going to take them to find out the root cause of these issues. And my understanding is that until they know the root cause, they're not going to fly again until it's safe. Certainly not with crew, and possibly even uncrewed. They're just not going to make these mistakes again. By the way, Boeing was not at this conference, and this is not the first time that they haven't had representatives at a conference involving Starliner. But they made a statement in response to NASA's spaceflight saying, quote, "We're grateful to NASA for its thorough investigation and the opportunity to contribute to it. In the 18 months since our test flight, Boeing has made substantial progress on corrective actions for technical challenges we've encountered and driven significant cultural changes across the team that directly align with the findings in the report. NASA's report will reinforce our ongoing efforts to strengthen our work and the work of all commercial crew partners in support of mission and crew safety, which is and must always be our highest priority. We're working closely with NASA to ensure readiness for future Starliner missions and remain committed to NASA's vision for 2 commercial crew providers." Which is kind of crazy because if you look back in time, NASA launched the Commercial Crew Program after the Space Shuttle retired in 2011. The goal, of course, was to pay private companies to develop spacecraft that could carry astronauts or cargo to the ISS. In September of 2014, NASA awarded contracts, gave money to both SpaceX and Boeing. Of course, SpaceX went on to build and fly Crew Dragon very regularly, and we see what happened with Boeing and Starliner. They've only had one half-crewed flight because they weren't even allowed to come home. Also crazy, Boeing got even more money than SpaceX. SpaceX got $2.6 billion. Boeing got $4.2 billion. This just blows my mind. And here is exactly what Jared had to say in the letter in his words. I just wanted to have this at the end. So in case you were trying to get your highlights in, this is just it's a very long letter. So here's what he had to say.
I would like to read a letter that I sent to the NASA workforce in just the last few minutes. So within the next week, Congress will be briefed by the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, and NASA's independent investigative report on the Starliner crewed flight test will be released publicly. So many of you know this program intimately, and some of you lived every development in real time. We returned the crew safely, but the path we took did not reflect NASA at our best. There is no expectation of perfection in missions as challenging as those that we are entrusted to undertake. Even with our best efforts and programs like CCP that have seen great success, mistakes will occur. What defines us is whether we learn from them, improve because of them, and strengthen confidence across this workforce and the nation that we serve. This requires transparency and accountability, neither of which can be selectively applied. In this letter, I will summarize the timeline, the organizational root cause, and the actions we are taking to restore trust and move forward. Let me begin with the most important point. Starliner has design and engineering deficiencies that must be corrected, but the most troubling failure revealed by this investigation is not hardware. It's decision-making and leadership that if left unchecked, could create a culture incompatible with human spaceflight. To give you a little program history, Starliner was conceived under the Commercial Crew Program in 2010 with the intent to establish dissimilar crew access to low Earth orbit. After the retirement of the Space Shuttle, it became a national imperative to never again accept a gap in American human spaceflight capability. Now, the first test, Orbital Flight Test 1 of Starliner, was in December of 2019. A mission elapsed timing error prevented the guidance software from calculating orbital insertion burn timing, which triggered excessive thruster firings, incorrect orbital insertion, major propellant use, and 10 thrusters that were declared failed off. This mission was declared a high visibility close call. Orbital Flight Test 2, or OFT-2, was launched in August of 2021. During the OFT-2 launch countdown cycle test of the service prop module, system. So this actually didn't launch, to be clear. But during OFT launch countdown cycle tests, the service module prop system manifold isolation valves, 13 of the 24 oxidizer valves failed to cycle open. So they were stuck in the closed position. And that resulted actually in a launch scrub. So the spacecraft and the booster itself were rolled back, and the service module was removed, and it was replaced for launch many months later, which actually led to the Orbital Flight Test 2, OFT-2, which did launch in May of 2022. Now, this mission proceeded mostly nominally compared to certainly the other mission. However, 3 aft service module RCS thrusters were declared failed off during the flight. Now, this led up to the actual crewed flight. So preparation for the crewed flight, OFT, and OFT-2 investigations did not drive to or take sufficient action on the actual root cause of the anomalies that we observed. The investigations often stopped short of the proximate or the direct cause, treated it with a fix, or accepted the issue as an unexplained anomaly. In some cases, the proximate cause diagnosis itself was incorrect due to insufficient rigor in following the data to its logical conclusion. Now, we still stepped into crewed flight tests, so CFT, which was launched in June of 2024. Now, after a lot of delays and an unexpected helium leak, NASA and Boeing launched astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams aboard Starliner. During the rendezvous and proximity operations, propulsion anomalies cascaded into multiple thruster failures and a temporary loss of 6 degrees of freedom control. Now, the controllers and the crew performed with extraordinary professionalism. Flight rules were appropriately challenged, control was recovered, and docking was achieved. It is worth restating what should be obvious. At that moment, had different decisions been made, had thrusters not been recovered, or had docking been unsuccessful, the outcome of this mission could have been very, very different. The astronauts did remain safely aboard the International Space Station while they were advocating for data, for more testing, and for leadership engagement necessary to complete their mission safely. On the ground, joint Boeing and NASA teams conducted tests, reviewed data, and evaluated next steps. In September 2024, Starliner undocked autonomously. It did experience an unexpected crew module propulsion failure and landed successfully, though zero fault tolerant in the crew module thrusters throughout reentry. Butch and Sonny subsequently returned safely to Earth aboard SpaceX Crew 9 in March of 2025. Now, talking about the investigation, mistakes incurred from program's inception and continued throughout execution, including contractual management, oversight posture, technical rigor, and leadership decision-making. Boeing built the spacecraft, and from the onset, NASA approved variances, and we agreed to fly it. As development progressed, design compromises and inadequate hardware qualification extended beyond NASA's complete understanding. Now, variances exist across all major aerospace programs and by themselves are not unusual. The engineering reality, however, is that Starliner, with its qualification deficiencies, is less reliable for crew survival than other crewed vehicles, and that was as noted by the report. But at NASA, we managed the contract. We accepted the vehicle, we launched the crew to space, we made decisions from docking through post-mission actions. A considerable portion of the responsibility and accountability rests here. Now, talking about root causes, we have identified organizational root causes. The technical investigations to identify the proximate or direct causes for the service module and crew module thruster anomalies remain ongoing. So I think acknowledging that present-day reality is essential to mission success. So to the root causes first. NASA's limited touch acquisition and management posture left the agency without the systems knowledge and development insight required to confidently certify a human-rated spacecraft, and insight versus oversight was not applied consistently. Second, Boeing's propulsion system design and certification approach allowed hardware to operate outside qualification limits, which is incompatible with crew safety margins. Third, NASA's programmatic desire to maintain 2 dissimilar crew transportation systems influenced technical and operational risk discussions. Now, it is through that lens that we examine leadership decision-making through the various phases of the mission. Pre-launch. More than 30 scheduled CFT launch attempts created cumulative schedule pressure and decision fatigue. Prior OFT thruster risk was never fully understood, corrective actions from OFT-1 were incomplete, and flight rationale was therefore inadequate. Witness statements routinely reflected a belief that management within the commercial crew program could only succeed if Starliner launched. Now, on orbit, disagreements over crew return options deteriorated into unprofessional conduct while the crew remained on orbit. Witness statements described an environment where advocacy tied to the Starliner program viability persisted alongside insufficient senior NASA leadership engagement to refocus teams on safety and mission outcomes. Now, post-mission, despite the loss of 6 degrees of freedom control and cost thresholds exceeding a Type A mishap by a factor of over 100, a mishap was not declared. Concern for the Starliner program's reputation influenced that decision. Initially, our commercial crew program investigated itself. Ultimately, these decisions were inconsistent with NASA's safety culture, and a subsequent independent investigation was commissioned, and the record is now being corrected. Today, we formally designate this event a Type A mishap to ensure lessons are fully captured for future missions. Programmatic advocacy exceeded reasonable bounds and placed the mission, the crew, and America's space program at risk in ways that were not fully understood at the time decisions were being contemplated. This created a culture of mistrust that can never happen again, and there will be leadership accountability. Now, our path forward, NASA will continue to work with Boeing, as we do all of our partners that are undertaking test flights. Sustained crew and cargo access to low Earth orbit will remain essential, and America benefits from competition and redundancy. But to be clear, NASA will not fly another crew on Starliner until technical causes are understood and corrected, the propulsion system is fully qualified, and appropriate investigation recommendations are implemented. A little bit to transparency. Transparency is not a weakness, it is a strength. We will release the investigation in full, redacted only where legally required or as directed by our commercial partner. Pretending unpleasant situations did not occur teaches the wrong lessons. Failure to learn invites failure again and suggests that in human spaceflight, failure is an option. It is not. America entrusts NASA with the hardest endeavors ever attempted. The world looks to us for the discoveries, achievements, and leadership only this agency can deliver, and that requires putting the mission and the crew first. We will achieve success through extreme ownership, immense competence, and decisive action. Thank you.
But let's hear some reactions. Respected space journalist and author Eric Berger said Isaacman is such a breath of fresh air at NASA. Far too often, we have been served platitudes in news conferences. Space is hard. Teams are doing their best. Proud of everyone, blah, blah. Today, we are getting accountability. And I couldn't agree more. Jonathan McDowell also said, agree with this. The transparency in today's Starliner report is NASA at its best. And as NASA used to be decades ago, I've missed this NASA. Congrats to Jared for restoring it. And so there's the latest with Boeing Starliner. I swear I wouldn't be surprised if they're working on a movie or a documentary about this. Butch and Sunny were so incredibly professional that entire time, and especially with all of the issues that they were having on orbit. And so I'm so glad that they're safe and that this situation wasn't much worse, because as you heard Jared say, it really could have been. But Jared has inherited a tough situation, and I feel like he's handling it so well. So we love this new NASA, and there's my update for today. I'm actually in Denver for a very special interview tomorrow at Lockheed Martin, so get excited for that. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. It's free, and I'll see you soon.